Welcome to Trust But Verify. I'm Pantea Modiri, and in next 1 hour, we will take up one of giants of international relations, or IR, and scrutinize his theories, claims, and understanding of our world. I'm talking about John Mearsheimer. And to help us unravel Mearsheimer's ideas, I have Dr. Alayar Kangarloo, who has much insight into the matters of human mind and political philosophy. Welcome, Dr. Kangarloo.
Hello, Ms. Modiri. I'm glad to be with you on another episode of your show. And I have to say right from the outset that, like you said, my comments about John Mearsheimer is no sign of disrespect, but utter love and admiration for the service he's doing to the field of international relations.
Mearsheimer gave a series of 3 lectures in November 2017 on liberal ideals and international realities for the Henry L. Stimson Lectures at Yale University. Mearsheimer is interested in the relationship between liberalism, realism, and nationalism, 3 concepts about which you have spoken widely, and I know you're rather passionate about. Could you describe these 3 schools of thought and what are their significance?
Well, liberalism is a political philosophy that promotes individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise. Individuals have many rights under liberalism, under liberal school of thought, such as right of ownership, pursuit of happiness, participation in political process, and expression of their opinion in political and in public domain. Nationalism, on the other hand, refers to a sense of national consciousness, raising one nation above all others and placing primary emphasis on promotion of its culture and interests as opposed to those of other nations or supranational groups. Realism is a school of thought that views world politics as a continuous competition among states vying for power and positioning within an anarchic global system devoid of a centralized authority. That's the end of the definition of all 3 schools of thought. What we call international order in the post-World War II was based on the hegemony of liberal democracies in the West. I'm going to go back to this point later on when I talk about liberal hegemony. These countries were all liberal democracies. While liberalism stresses cooperation, realism stresses the competitive and the conflictual side of international relations. Realists, like John Mearsheimer, consider the principal actors in international arena to be the states, the governments, which are concerned with their own security, act in pursuit of their own national interest, and struggle for power.
Yes, as you mentioned, Mearsheimer also talks about liberal hegemony. It seems to me the word liberal and hegemony should not appear together. On the other hand, Mearsheimer has chosen this label for the way the West has managed the international affair for a good reason, and that is to highlight the role of the West in post-World War order and construction of institutions necessary to promote their lifestyle. Dr. Kangarloo, can you tell us what Mearsheimer means by liberal hegemony and whether it is an order that is coming to its end, as he puts it?
Liberal hegemony refers to the foreign policy that the United States and Europe have pursued since the end of Cold War. Some experts, actually I have to say here that liberal hegemony existed even before Cold War. It really started at the end of World War II, but the real manifestation of what John Mearsheimer is referring to really started at the end of Cold War, which was around 1990. So between 1945 to 1990, a period of about 45 years, 45 to 50 years, the world was really divided into 2 camps. The capitalist camp, the free world, the Western world, and the world basically protected from the security and the military point of view by NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And the other camp was the socialist camp, the camp that was protected by the Warsaw Pact under the auspices of Soviet Union and primarily Russia. Some experts use the label Westphalian order or other orders for this period of time. But Mearsheimer prefers liberal hegemony. Here we should talk about a few groups who are involved in forging and justifying the United States foreign policy. So here we go back and forth between two concepts. The concept of liberal democracy, which is what we refer to as the way the countries that fall within that camp manage themselves internally, like how the United States really govern itself within the United States, within the country, is what we refer to as liberal democracy. But the word liberal hegemony really refers to the foreign policy, the US foreign policy primarily, and the European foreign policy. One group is the foreign policy establishment, the groups within, the groups basically that decide and impact the US foreign policy are multitude and multiple. And one of those groups is the diplomats, the official diplomats, the State Department in the United States, the Foreign Ministry in England, and the foreign ministries of all the other countries. These are and then there are former U.S. government officials, people who leave the diplomatic profession and then they take up other positions. Former congressmen, think tanks, and lobbyists who all together sometimes, according to John Mearsheimer, they're all together put together and they're called the blob. These people have a consensus over how to conduct American foreign policy. But there are some foreign policy experts who think this policy is a flawed strategy, and Mearsheimer is one of those experts. Implementation of liberal hegemony was based on a few tenets. One tenet, liberal idea of rights of humans and their entitlement to certain rights as is guaranteed in the US Constitution. And that's superior, the part of this philosophy, and would cause more prosperity. And the idea is that this would cause more prosperity, freedom, and peace around the world. So these are the principles that are worth dedicating resources to, according to the believers in the liberal democracy, to protect and promote it. For a few decades, this policy worked, and a number of countries governed under such policy their number doubled from 1945, where the World War ended, till 2015. Although there has been a setback in the rate of increase in liberal democracies, this is not primarily due to the flaw in the philosophy, but a backlash of some of the Cold War policies, especially and specifically opening to China in 1975 and overzealous advocacy of the flow of technology and capital to post-Soviet Russia and China. We can elaborate on this further as time goes on.
Sure. Mearsheimer thinks that the stocks of liberal hegemony was up during the unipolar moments, or with other words, when the world system had one great power, up until 2000, he says. But after, Mearsheimer asserts that all hell broke loose. He backs up his arguments by the sliding back of some Eastern European countries away from liberal democracy and strong assertion of China and Russia, as you just mentioned. Is that sufficient reason to come to this conclusion?
Mearsheimer seems to me that he looks at the American foreign policy to be in deep trouble. And the rise of Donald Trump, he views the rise of Donald Trump as a result of that. He thinks liberalism is a doomed foreign policy because nationalism and realism are more powerful forces, and they will undermine liberalism. Mm-hmm. In reality, to be able to provide a good answer to the question that Mearsheimer raises, we need to compare these three isms. Mearsheimer has a good understanding of what liberalism is and what it is as a foreign policy. Liberalism and nationalism involve the questions of whether humans are individual in nature, or they're social beings. That's a profoundly important question in the way that Mearsheimer looks at this, and in the way that most philosophers and political scientists look at it. The second question is, what is our collective ideas of good life? Mearsheimer believes that humans are inherently social beings. Mm-hmm. He thinks that we're born into society, primarily the family, and then later on school and the society at large. And that makes us highly socialized.
Yeah.
He believes that our individuality grows out of our primarily social character. He also doesn't think that it's possible to reach a universal consensus on the question about the good life. These are very important ingredients of his school of thought. He believes that the fact that liberal democracy is in a decline is because it's not a preferred system of governance outside American university campuses and in many countries like Russia, China, and Iran.
Yeah. Although he mentions he's very happy that he lived in a liberal democracy, but how can we arrive at the decline of the liberalism from the answer to these questions? I understand the difference between liberalism as a philosophy and as a foreign policy. Liberalism as a philosophy based on which governments and societies are organized seem to be on the rise. If the behavior of Russia and China has disappointed Mearsheimer, that should not be a good reason to issue the death sentence of the liberal democracies, is it not?
I agree. I understand why the argument of whether the humans are social or individualistic in nature and the question of the collective definition of a good life are both legitimate questions. But one needs to answer first why these questions are the only questions regarding the rise or decline of liberalism, and why realism plus nationalism, this is John Mearsheimer's model, offers a better answer as a philosophy of conducting the affairs of the society and as a foreign policy. Mearsheimer offers very little in this regard, in the regard of the criticism I just leveled against his idea. He believes that human nature offers an insight in this regard. I agree with that. Liberals take on this question is really a matter of the fact that humans are atomistic, are individualistic, are isolated in nature, and they act as such in the state of nature. Hobbes and Locke laid the foundation of liberalism, and they believe that humans are individualistic in nature, and after they form a society, they come together forming a social contract to protect the rights of individuals. This is also a very important issue that, if time allows, I'm going to elaborate on that.
Sure.
How important that is. As we know well, Mearsheimer opposes this view and believes that humans are born as a social animal, and then his definition of the sense of nationalism becomes fundamental in suppressing liberal tendencies.
Yeah, indeed, because added to these equations, he brings up the universal definition of a good life. You mentioned this before, but this last issue seems to imply that there are societies in the world who collectively rebel against values of liberalism. While I can see why someone who thinks like that should be disappointed in the chances of liberal democracy to flourish, is that really the case, is my question.
I don't believe so. I don't think that the social dimension of human character dominates its individual dimension. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, I have to say, humans are born alone, live alone, and die alone. And those are most important three periods and three events in any human life. Forming societies are not due to natural tendencies, but is a desperate attempt to overcome the barriers between man and nature. This is where John and I digress and split our ways of looking at this particular
Yes.
concept. If humans lived alone, they would have never achieved all that they have achieved throughout history. So while it is true that achievements are a strong reason for us to become social, but this is only a pragmatic reason, not a matter of nature. Furthermore, when we give up our individual realm, the so-called private domain or privacy, we lose certain privileges in the interest of gaining some others by living within the herd. The internal battle between privileges of individualism and disadvantages of social life is an ongoing saga in the human psyche and is the basis of all ill wills and evil doings. When an individual robs a bank, he does that out of a sense of entitlement of a property that would have been his if he lived alone in this world. Or when a husband cheats on his wife, he does it completely out of individualistic interest and against the common interest of him and his wife. As such, I believe that social dimension of human beings is subservient to their individualistic nature, and this, in my opinion, is one of the fundamental flaws in Mearsheimer's perspective to the verdict of doom and gloom for the future of liberal democracies.
That makes sense, how you are coming into a different conclusion. Another argument that Mearsheimer makes is about the so-called inalienable rights, rights like those guaranteed in Human Rights Charter. If you believe in liberal ideals, then you cannot treat others any different. Tolerance becomes order of the day. There is a tendency for people when they really disagree and compete with each other, tolerance will not be enough. This makes the need for a state to act as an arbiter. Liberals also believe state could act against the interest of individual, because a powerful state can act against the interest of the individual's rights. So how this conflicting role of the government works out? Does one dominate the other? And if does, what would happen?
Mearsheimer posits that liberalism, as invented by Hobbes and Locke, justifies why humans leave the state of nature, and the reason that they create a state is to create a tool that protects individuals in a society. The assumptions about individuality and about the ability of people to use their critical faculties to answer the big questions of life are at the heart of potential conflict that liberal perspectives cause. The role of the government, on the other hand, is to guarantee the rights of individuals against each other. And on the other hand, state is constituted of a group of people, of a group of individuals. So you see, you're talking about a situation where state is a collection of individuals that is designed and is constructed to protect the right of the individual, but the state itself is a society, is a social being made of individuals. So we see that this clash of individual nature and our social nature at every aspect and every aspect of the human life are in clash with each other, and it's conceivable that some people might view that one of them as being dominant and the other one as being affected and less important and subservient to the other. And all throughout society, philosophy and the political philosophy, there are experts and believers who believe as one factor dominating the other, or vice versa. And when it comes to thinking about the role of government as the enforcement of the right of the individual requires more resources, the state extracts more resources from the individuals to build the tools to protect him. So this is a very important issue that requires a little bit of elaboration. So we believe, Hobbes believes, Locke believes that individuals are really the core of every society, but although individuals are more comfortable living alone, they have more freedom, they have more privacy, they have more possession, but somehow they can philosophize the benefits and the privileges of living with others. In other words, forming societies. That is where trouble begins, because when you live, if you are one person and you own the whole world is yours. All the resources, all the beauty, all the environment is yours. But then you don't have anyone to share with. And that is very important for humans. Humans really don't want things just to possess it. They want to possess things to show off to others their possessions. So if there is no one to show off, possession becomes meaningless. And this conflict constantly is ongoing among human beings. And that is really the source of the trouble with Mearsheimer's idea about this particular, the fact that the social nature of the humans dominates this individualistic nature. So what do these humans do? They start forming society. As soon as you divide your resources and your life with one person, it means you have really given up half of what you could have owned if you lived in this world alone. But somehow human beings can justify giving up certain rights, certain individualistic rights, in the interest of benefits of living with others. And that's exactly where the government comes in, because once people start sharing these ideas, you start sharing life with others, more than 1 or 2 millions of people in the society and in the country, then what happens is that you might lose a lot of rights, and then which rights you lose and which rights you keep, that's the job of government. So we form governments in order for all of us to come to a consensus as to which rights to give up and which rights to maintain. And the rights that I hold dear to me, they all usually are reflected in certain documents like Constitution and other documents that judiciary or penal laws and the civil rights protect. So this going back and forth between individual right and the social right and the role of government as an arbiter is very important. And then the states, once they're formed, they realize that this job is much bigger than society thought at the outset. So and then states start growing. They start demanding resources in order to be able to stand up to the responsibility. And as the states grow, the individual is impoverished, and the size of the state threatens the very rights it was built to protect. That's what Mearsheimer is talking about. But the dilemma is ignoring one fact, and that is the reason why the governments grow is not just because it has an insatiable desire to grow, but state in a liberal democracy will assume the protection of various parts of rights of the individual. So state is not there to violate on the rights of the individual. On the other hand, on the contrary, the states are there really to protect the very rights. And as states, especially in liberal democracies, become more and more particular about which rights to protect, the states start growing. And we can see that the United States has one of the largest governments in the world. Our annual GNP, gross domestic product, is something of the order of 27 to $30 trillion, and that's the size of the growth of a state. And some people feel threatened by that. The state provides security of borders, safety of living spaces, education, atmosphere for potential to convert into skills, etc., etc. This aspect of the growth of government not only, in my opinion, doesn't threaten individual rights, but it actually protects and enhances the quality of individuals' life.
Thank you, Dr. Kangarloo, for providing insight in such engaging topic and highlighting the distinct features of liberalism and the theory of liberal hegemony. In your final remarks, you set the stage for continuing this discussion in our next episode. I thank our audience for their attention to these important issues and promise to verify the claims of some of the biggest names in political philosophy, international relations, philosophy, and other issues touching our lives in these times. With this, I also thank my technical team that make this podcast possible and look forward to seeing all you next week, this time in another episode of Trust But Verify. Goodbye.